So, I've been fascinated, I mean, really, with the subject of change for much of my adult life. Changing. Why? How do we change? Well, there are theories about change, by the way, and um, I think that a psychotherapist, which I was for 20 something years. I think if you were a psychotherapist, you'd have to be very interested in the theory of change, and more than not, you're saying, what the hell is going on here? Because we want to change. If there's some reason, something causing dissatisfaction, or what the Buddha called suffering, that would be a good reason to want to change, wouldn't it? If you followed the Buddha's teaching that everybody suffers, then wouldn't everybody want to change? Well, then you have to say, well, yeah, but maybe I just suffered just a little. So I would rather improve than change. Yeah? So I actually have this, anyway, so I think I said years ago that I had come to the conclusion that change was a miracle. And miracles happen. So it's not that I don't believe that change can't happen, but I came to the belief that it's extraordinarily rare to experience true change in someone that you love or in yourself. And that's kind of the meaning of it. It's a very well-known story. I know the person who actually said it at a Dharma talk 30 years ago, maybe. He had been just inspired by this Korean teacher who was traveling the country, and at the end of that Dharma talk, he went up to me and he said, Master, could I come and study with you in your monastery in Korea? And the teacher said, sure, just be prepared to die. So if someone told you that, if they said, so like you came to Long Beach Meditation and said, well, can I come and join your Sangha? Sure, if you just be prepared to die, and you may. So well, what would you do? Say, see you later, alligator. Yeah? So it occurs to me, that isn't change dying to what is? Isn't it? Isn't change, true change, dying to what is presently the reality of what I am? And I would say, and again, it's kind of like this. So improvement, what I call improvement of function, is building on, it's like, adding nice, little talents and tricks or whatever to what I am. But I sure as hell am not interested in changing what I am, right? I'm just going to add to it and improve it. As Norman and I would agree, to improving your sexual function, for instance. This came from a discussion we had yesterday I was talking about the Buddha saying that samadhi is the highest. It's a higher pleasure than any sensual experience. That caught Norman's attention. Well, I think it got a lot of people's attention. Higher than any sensual experience. Well, he did say that. I think he believed it. So I wonder, if you were able to just ask yourself that question, I've brought this up many times. What would you say to that teacher? To yourself, if that teacher said to you, "Sure, if you're willing to die, you can come to my monastery." What would your reaction be? If you sincerely wanted to go study with this person, who's, and to use, indicate, perhaps you thought this was an enlightened being. Die? Just be willing to die? So I kind of think there's some Maybe Jesus said that. You have to be born again. I don't know how it goes, but I do think that there's a Christian that in some way it's analogous. That you have to be born again. That would be dying to the old self, to what you are. So, number one, I think it's a no-brainer that if you really call it down to just that level of, I'm coming to a psychotherapist because I'm really kind of unhappy in my relationship, or I don't like my job, or say, we can change that if you'll just die. That therapist would be out of luck. We're talking maybe one client for the next 10 years, maybe. So, I've pondered this and sat with this for many, many years. It fascinates me. Basically, it fascinates me, because I personalize it into my own life. And I wrote in the little essay that I know that tomorrow morning when I wake up, I'll wake up with that old friend resistance. On some form, that old friend will be there, friend/enemy. In some form, it may say, I'm too tired to sit this morning, I sat for 2 hours yesterday, morning and evening. I'm too tired to sit this morning. Or it may say, I've got a non-ending week. This week is just unbelievable. I'll be lucky if I can sit by next Friday, Or, just hundreds and hundreds of reasons. So, and that goes on in this mind after having sat for 30 years and going to the forest refuge for 6 weeks or 2 months or 6 months. And I come out, and just sort of like find, that I will keep that rhythm of the forest refuge for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4. It's just, but gradually I start going back to the old pattern, the whole old system. It's amazing to watch. So the Buddha, when the Buddha talked about, he didn't, as far as I know, he didn't talk about the word resistance. I don't know that that's necessarily a word that was used. That would, I don't know. Who knows Sanskrit or Pali? I don't. But I would say that he offered. He suggested that 5 basic psychological causes of resistance, which we all know we call them the hindrances, the 5 famous hindrances. So that, so just briefly, the desire, greed, lust. That's the bad. Lust, you start off with a desire, that it's not so bad, right? Desire, well, that's not so bad. I desire to be in line. Desire goes to greed, goes to lust. And aversion goes to hatred, goes to anger. And lust, and sloth and torpor, or sleepiness. Did anyone feel any sleepiness today? As you said. Or restlessness, agitation, worry. And, that's a bunch, right? Restlessness, agitation, and worry. That's just one thing. The mind scattered and distracted. And then, of course, the last one is my favorite, the one so lovely, doubt. The most insidious of the 5, I think. So I consider the 5 hindrances his psychological explanation for resistance. And then I do think that maybe, I'm going to go to in just a minute what is most oddly comforting to me. I really don't want to talk too long. Okay, so you go to the early 1900s, 1890s, and Freud comes along. And he says something that's really fascinating. He says, when you're doing real analysis or psychotherapy, You can't get anywhere until you analyze the resistance. Wow. Resistance is like, in other words, is like this crust on top that really prevents any going deeper. Resistance. So he said you have to analyze it. You have to understand it. You have to see it. I somewhat would say that, and especially in the past 2 years, I really do sit with and try to analyze my own resistance to deepening my practice. And deepening the practice has been somewhat of the theme of our intermediate course. So Freud says you can't really get anywhere, so like you and your therapist, you and your analyst or your therapist together, y'all better be looking at what is this resistance? What is this resistance to change? And so I think another little sentence in my essay popped up. I said that certainly we see in therapy people have a death grip on change, right? So maybe therapy is about releasing or loosening that death grip a little bit, so that we're not so fearful of change. I go back again and say to you, though, that if you, as long as you pretend that change is improvement, you see that's the problem, because then you're never going to really get at the resistance, because no one's going to resist improving. Not really. Who's going to resist improving? Come on. Improving. It's kind of nice, isn't it? Right? Improving your weight, losing weight, instead, or gaining weight is the case, done rarely, but never. So if you really if you cut down to the bottom of it and you say, oh, no, wait just a minute, maybe change is about that guy saying, well, yeah, you can go to my monastery if you're willing to die. Then we're all thrown back on our haunches. Oh, well, maybe I'm just for improvement. And there is nothing wrong with that. Please, I promise you. But see, I utterly believe that clarifying your intention is the name of the game, right? I mean, if I go around pretending that I'm all about change and I would run like a bat out of hell if real change came, so that then I'm really not even going to probably maximize improving my function. So I would say that that analyzing the resistance would be somewhat would be clarifying your own intention. So my mind is now trying to say page 3. What was on page 2? Was that on 2? So I don't know how this fit, but I just wanted to share this. Well, it's the death grip. The most wonderful story of the death grip that I've ever read is the Buddha's story, or it's different ways, but so you're standing on the street and you see some person literally holding a burning coal in her hand, screaming to the top of her, just yelling in pain. Right? So Raoul says, drop it, let that go. And she looks back at you and says, I can't. And then you say, why? And she says, because it's mine. And if you saw that, if I saw that on the street, I would say, there's a crazy person. Right? I feel some compassion, I hope, but I would say I would just say that's not the human race. That's just someone who's crazy. But the Buddha said it's every person alive. And I've often thought, here's this guy who woke up, and when he woke or awakened, and his initial thought was, I'm not going to try to teach this, right? I mean, his initial thought was just to hell with this. And apparently, a Deva came down and said, you've got to teach. But imagine, and this is kind of hard to imagine, I think for anybody, for all of us. But imagine if you saw that. I mean, imagine if you live, if that was your reality, that you saw that everyone was clinging to something that was burning them up. Think of how your heart would break. Think of the compassion. So maybe that's why he taught for 45 years. So I throw that in there to say that that analogy is if you want to talk about resistance, that is ultimate, isn't it? I mean that our clinging is so total that even pain and suffering will not cause us to let go. So this is really serious. So now I'm going to get to the hopeful part, which is I'm just kidding. So I wanted to then kind of do a little bit of a turn back to my own sort of pondering and contemplation, which really, to some extent, has been mostly or more consistent since I came back from the Forest Refuge in January. I've been very fascinated for if you're fascinated with change, which I am, I've really been fascinated then with the concept of inertia. What is inertia? What is it? What's inertia? And number one, Rob is sitting back there. So number one, he's just getting ready to just knock me off this stage. I know what inertia is because he's very smart. So I've always been fascinated with inertia because it isn't what we think it is. I mean, it is, but it isn't. So like if you look up in Merriam-Webster, if you look it up, they're going to start with psychology. They're going to start right off because we're just all human beings and we can't stay out of it, right? Inertia, apathy, laziness, loginess, So I feel, I've got all this inertia. So that's what I would call psychological definition. But go to number 2 definition, and the word physics pops right up, and then, and if physics pops up, you can rest assured. My eyes start glazing over, right? I can't even say that word. I can say psychology, but I can't think of it. But physics, it's like I got through high school by cheating. It was just, I just couldn't do any of that stuff. Geometry, it's unbelievable. Luckily, I had little issues with guilt.
It's been recorded.
I don't want to pursue this line. It's very non-dharmic and non-Buddhist. What is the So this is Mr. Newton. A very, very smart dude. There are many people who would say that his discoveries are the most important discoveries in the creation of the whole field of physics. Some people say. So I'm just going to kind of make a stab at this because as I said, it's just extraordinarily basic to what we are. He says that every object has the tendency to resist change in velocity. Right? There's a second part to it that I'll say for a moment. Every object tends to resist a change in velocity. Velocity would be speed or direction. Right? So an object tends to resist a change in the speed or in its direction. Okay, so first of all, when I think about that, or meditate on that, I think, well, am I an object? Are you an object? No. I'm not an object, right? You know, what did the Buddha say? The Buddha said we are two things. And the first thing he said is we're rupa. What do you think rupa is? Rupa is materiality. Rupa is you're an object. So guess what? If you're an object, you're subject to Newton's law of motion. It's astonishing to think that. I mean, in other words, you go to the hindrances which are psychological. No, I'm greedy, that's why I'm resisting, or I'm angry, that's why. But heaven forbid, what if I'm resisting because an object by definition and from its nature resists change in motion? It's an extraordinary thought. I find a great deal of comfort in that, because then I start thinking, well, bless our hearts. We're starting off, we're really behind the eight ball, so to speak, right? I mean, as object, rocks resist, flowers resist, dolphins resist. We resist as objects. What happens when you get in the day and you get on the treadmill? How hard is it to change that velocity? Just because you're on that treadmill, right? Going to work, teaching, whatever I'm doing, there is this motion to it that is extraordinarily difficult to stop. I find it difficult to get up in the morning because it applies to an object at rest. That's zero motion, isn't it? Object is zero. Zero speed or direction. So an object at rest has the same resistance to change in direction or motion. Well, then, as far as I know, and now this is where we get really, I'm just all totally out of it now, because we go now to quantum physics, which, as far as I know, added energy. Not only is an object subject to Newton's law, but so is energy. And, of course, the Buddha had a name for that, too, Nama. Nama is consciousness, mind, energy. So Nama Rupa would be mass and energy. So that, obviously, this is like way out of my league. I do know that it does, as you go towards the speed of light, it changes. And if you go to, the infinitesimal or large. But basically, that guy was very smart. By the way, the third one is, the third law is that an object will, if it is met with an equal force, it will go. When it's met with a force, it will resist, and in an opposite direction. It will resist with the same power in the opposite direction. So, did you ever watch two talking heads on TV, a conservative and liberal? Right. That's Newton's third law, I think. Right? Is that we resist in the exact same force in the opposite direction. But it is almost like miraculous to watch two opposing. It is almost miraculous how equal it is and how opposite it is. So now I'm almost finished. So one of my favorite. Maybe my favorite teacher of all time was Da Wei. I've got a lot of favorite teachers. You know that I have this theory that you should never trust a teacher until they've been dead at least 200 years. I actually mean that. I am not kidding, right? I made a little bit of an exception with Krishnamurti, sort of. He was been dead like 20 or 30 years, but it's only sort of an exception. 200 years is safe. You can say, okay. So Da Wei, of course, he's been dead like 1,000 years. So that's a very safe guy. So he had this expression. This one student was writing him who's pretty elderly. He might have been 73 years old. He was pretty elderly, I think, and he was writing him, and he was kind of discouraged. And Da Wei wrote him this beautiful letter, and he said, your practice is beautiful, and a beautiful practice, and you put everything, you through the day you're correct. And he said, don't worry about it. I'm really paraphrasing. He said, not to worry, so to speak. Of course, they believed in reincarnation. So really, they'd always say, so don't worry about it. You're going to hit it the next time around, right? But anyway, he said, all you need really is a burst of power. I just love that. And he said that to many students. He would talk about meditation is about conserving power, and then when you conserve power, you can use power. So, okay, so now we're going to come to the second part of Newton's law, first law of motion, or law of inertia. I think this is so, really, I'm watching a movie of us right now, and a movie it is hysterical that I'm talking about Newton's law of inertia. Oh my God. Well, if my high school teacher could see me now. The second part of it would be, let's see, what is it? So an object has a tendency. An object would be, you could just change the word object for Eric. Or Jane. An object has a tendency to resist a change in speed or direction, motion or direction, speed or direction, unless acted upon by a net force. That's an extraordinary thing. That is really an extraordinary thing. Because I think, number one, forget net for now. Acted upon by a force, to me, implies meditation. The art of meditation can become a force, a power. And of course, I'll go back to Dawei's The Burst of Power. Meditation can become in your life a power if you are able to give yourself over to it, which of course then comes back to that whole thing of fear of change. Right? Well, I'm going to come on Sundays because that Victor's kind of funny. I enjoy coming and sitting with him. He's just entertaining. No, but I mean, really, I know you don't think it. But I mean, you might come and say, come on Sundays. And look, I'll try Wednesday night every once in a while. I might sit for 20 minutes. Okay, so what are the parameters of our willingness to give ourselves over to meditation becoming a force and or a power that can act on an object being me? That's an enormously important question. Do you have an answer? Right? I'm convinced, like how many of us are wild about cults? I mean, we have such an aversion to getting caught in cult. I mean, we really do. It's natural. It's instinctive. I do. So we do have this. We have this tendency to not want to get caught or trapped in anything. And so I wonder if even meditation is this thing. I see that it's beneficial. It really helps. It's beneficial. It calms me down. I like it. But, God forbid that I would want it to become a force, a power that could actually change this object. And then the second part of it, and then I'm finished, is the word net. Because for it to move, for it to change the object, to change it, it has to be a net force. More powerful. In other words, a stronger force, right? That it can't be equal to the object. It has to be stronger than that. To become a net force, it has to become embodied in your daily life. Sorry. That to me is the key. Is that, in other words, it has to be integrated into tomorrow. As long as you've got it isolated, right? You've got it controlled over here today, right? You're safe. You're safe, right? But if it is not isolated into moments of sitting on your cushion for 45 minutes, 5 days a week, I don't care. Even that's a form of control. You say, oh my God, well, I don't have to worry about what Victor's saying because I sit every morning for 30 minutes and every evening for 40 minutes, 30 minutes. Of course, the rest of the day I go to hell. No, forget it. But so, well, in the sense of getting lost, getting lost in the program or the mechanical function, which is, again, back to Newton's law. So, and really, the Buddha's dependent origination, it's nothing but mechanics. It's just mechanics. Breaking the mechanical chain is another way of talking about it. So anyway, I am really convinced that the place where it's scary is stopping who you are at 2 o'clock tomorrow. You know? Just stopping at 2 o'clock tomorrow and saying, oops, right? And breathing 10 seconds. And at 4 o'clock. I don't even know. I have no idea. But it is something about that I aspire to in terms of making it just not a force acting upon this object, but a net force acting upon this object. So I find this to be not discouraging, but incredibly positive. And it occurs to me that is what's so amazing about being human. That's the thing about us that is so amazing. That we are on this planet with this potential to change. A flower can't do it. You know, it can be beautiful, you know, but we can really change.